Rev up your engines! Today I'm going to tell you the truth about Toyota Yaris. This particular one is a 2007, and originally they were all like this one. They were made in Japan. Then even later, for some strange reason, Toyota decided they weren't even going to make them anymore, and they just became Mazdas. They were rebadged Mazdas, made by Mazda. Toyota didn't have anything to do with making them. They were just selling them and calling them Toyota Yaris. So they have a rather strange history. But this particular one, being made in Japan, it's proven to be a bulletproof little transportation car. The original owner, he's had it for 15 years. It was $13,000 new, so that's less than $1,000 a year that he had to pay for this car. This still runs like a clock. And of course, being a Toyota, starts right up, 143,000 miles on it. Now, the only thing wrong now is the brake and the ABS light is on, but there's a story behind that. His wife drove it a while with the emergency brake on, and obviously heated it up and messed something up in the back for the ABS sensors. We'll look that up later. Still works perfectly fine, but those stupid lights are on right after she left the emergency brake on. All that heat probably melted something. This is a bare bones economy car. There's no arguing that. But it does have AC, does have power windows. Strangely enough, even has room for a baby in the back. Look, it's got a reasonable amount of space in the back. It's not that tiny. They had to pretty much maximize what they could get out of a little bitty car. They knew what they were doing. I just guess Toyota, for some reason, decided they weren't going to get into the micro car selling in the United States. They still sell many small cars all over the world. My daughter-in-law's from Singapore. There's all kinds of weird little micro cars flying around there. But in the United States, their biggest market, they were more or less interested in making the Corolla their big seller for smaller cars, and they weren't that interested in micro cars. But they're not as small as you think. Got a pretty deep trunk. Like I say, they maximize these things. Now, they are small cars. You can hear when you close the trunk. Yeah, it's light metal, better gas mileage. This thing, 14 years old, going on 15. It gets like 38, 39 miles a gallon on a highway. You check out many of the new cars, they still don't even get to it. And this is real gas mileage, not some BS federal rating that half of it's made up, what the guy actually gets, because they're a light, small car. It's 1.5 liters, but it's a Toyota 1.5 liters. These things are virtually indestructible, as long as you change the oil and don't overheat them. It's one of the best small engines they ever made. Americans aren't that big on small engines, so they're not that popular here. The rest of the world, they're extremely popular. These things can last forever. And being normally aspirated, there's no turbocharger to brake, there's no fancy 1500 PSI GDI injectors. It's a normal fuel injectors on the intake, a system that can last 5, 6, 700,000 miles or more if you take care of it. And yes, it's a Toyota. The air conditioner still works on it perfectly fine. But if you remember, the ABS light's on, so let's check it up and see what happened. Turn itself on, reading it automatically. For the ABS system, since the ABS light is on. The rear speed sensor circuit is bad on the right hand. Cars always go where you're sitting. So if you're sitting in the car, the right hand is this side. So go to that side. The right rear speed sensor or the wiring was probably melted once you left the emergency brake on. That builds up heat, was on too long, and it's probably melted either the wiring or the sensor. So we jack up the right rear tire, and off comes the tire. Gotta kick that one off. You can see under here, there's the sensor wire. Its connector's all wobbling along. So we're gonna replace that. Now the wiring itself just unplugs, and we unbolt this stuff. Replace it with the new one. To buy an expensive Toyota one, we got an aftermarket one. So we'll unbolt the little wiring harness, and it's coming off. And off it comes. And as we pull it out, you can see the little wire broke. There's two wires, one of them broke off. Now the only hard part was, to get to the end that plugged in, we had to get the baby seat out of the way and get inside here to unplug it. Here's where it plugs into, right here. So we'll go inside the trunk. There's the hole that it comes through. Then we can grab this end and move it up so we can reach it at the top. Then we stick our hand between the door, and there's the little connector. Not much working on here, but it'll clip in. There, now that's plugged in. Finally, it goes on this way, nice and tight. It's on there solid. Just bolt the two bolts on, the one on the bottom and the one on the top. Get it nice and tight, and then snap the rubber grommet so water doesn't get in the trunk. Well, this occurred because the emergency brake was left on too long while they were driving, and it melted the wire off. Well, we put the wheel back on the hubcap, line up the hole, then snap all the plastic crap back on, put the molding back on, close the trunk, go back inside, and turn the check engine light off. Turn itself off, so we gotta manually turn it off. It's ABS, erase trouble codes. Now it's erased. Start up and take it for a spin. Now we're driving down the road and you can see that the right rear speed sensor is still saying 0 kilometers per hour, and the others are saying the right speed. The system's stuck on metric because I like the metric data better when I'm analyzing vehicles. But in this case, even though those wires were broken, there's more damage than that. So when the emergency brake was on and it heated everything up, I'm guessing it melted more stuff. Now the wire definitely melted off here, so if it got that hot, it probably broke the sensor. Now the owner doesn't want to spend the $140 something that the dealer wants for the sensor, so he's ordering one online, and when he gets it, I'll put it on. You better hope that's all it is, because if it isn't that, it means that it fried the computer circuit that drives this, in which case you'd have to replace the computer. And fixing the ABS on a car that runs perfect otherwise, it's a big reason guys often will not fix them when they break down. When they break down, they go to non-ABS normal braking with no anti-lock braking capability. So the lesson to be learned here is, do not drive with your emergency brake pulled on if you have anti-lock brakes, because you can cause an awful lot of damage. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Hero 1234 says, Scotty, what are your thoughts on a 2010 to 12 Hyundai Genesis Coupe? I'm looking for one quick and reliable, but I'm also looking at a 2004 Lexus IS300 and a 2007 Acura TL Type S. Which would you think would be the best option? By far, the 2004 Lexus IS300 would be the best option. You do not want to buy a used Genesis. They fall apart as they age. You're talking about a 10 to 12-year-old Genesis. Do not buy one of those used, especially you're talking about the 2.0T, the little 4-cylinder turbo. Don't buy it. The Lexus is 10 times the car. The Acura TL Type S, these are nice vehicles too, but the Lexus is much better. It's going to last longer. It's going to be cheaper to maintain than the Acura. But whatever you do, do not buy the Genesis. That would be the biggest mistake you could possibly make. Buying a used Genesis that's 10, 12 years old, probably with 100-something thousand. The Lexus can go 300,000-400,000 miles. The Genesis cannot. David XO says, my car cranks, but it won't start. I got a Toyota Highlander 2008. It lost power when I was on the road. I stuck on the accelerator and then it just died. There's no error showing. A mechanic says either my ECU is damaged or it needs to be reprogrammed. Well, one, I would start with a completely different mechanic myself. I don't think that guy knows what the heck he's doing, because the only reason I've ever seen a Toyota Highlander die on the road like that, 2008, I'm sure it's got a lot of mileage, was because either the alternator stopped working or the fuel pump went out. Go someplace else, get the battery load tested in the alternator. I'd guess you probably just need an alternator. Once in a while, the fuel pumps will go out on them. But I got a customer with a Highlander who's got 550,000 miles and it's still running fine. I have never, ever seen a computer go bad on one of those. And I've never seen a Toyota that stopped driving on the road and the problem was the computer need reprogramming. Never seen that, ever. Start with another mechanic who's better than that guy with Toyota. So I don't think the guy knows what the heck he's doing on a Toyota. Edward Carmatic says, Scotty, love your videos. I decided to get a Nissan Xterra, but they're so rare I can't find one. I haven't been able to find a good CRV either. I'm wondering, are there SUVs good, like a Pathfinder? The Xterra and the Pathfinder aren't that much different. If you don't mind an Xterra, look for a Pathfinder. They're Nissans. As they age, certain things break. You'd have a mechanic like me check out the engine and the transmission. If they were good, go ahead and buy it. But if the engine burned oil or the transmission was going out, do not buy any Nissan product. Now, the CRVs are 10 times better than a Nissan. But like you say, they're hard to find and they're expensive. You could also look at any of the Toyotas, but they're going to be hard to find. They're going to be even more expensive. But realize one thing. If you really do research and put on your thinking cap and pay a mechanic to check out cars, you're going to have to pay to get a good car. You pay more, you get a better car. That's just the way the market works. Most people can get some magic where, oh, they got this beautiful car for only $2,000. No, that rarely happens. You're going to have to pay for a good car. But what would you rather do? Buy a Toyota or a Honda and it lasts you 10, 12 years? Or buy a Nissan cheaper and it broke in 3 or 4 years? I'd rather pay a few thousand more and get a better car. And I'd advise you to do that. Keep looking for Hondas or Toyotas. Roy Hines says, my 2010 Honda Pilot has a crack on the inner tie rod boot. It's wet but not leaking on the ground. Is that an indication of a bad wreck or the seal needs to be replaced? If it's not dripping slipping and getting on the ground and you're not having to add power steering fluid, it hasn't done any damage yet. That is what's called a dust boot. It keeps dust from getting in there because the dust will then get on the rack and it will eat the seal, then you'll start leaking power steering fluid. You're not adding power steering fluid, it's not leaking yet, so just take it apart, replace the boot and put it back together. Once you start losing fluid, then you got to replace the rack. But if it's not leaking fluid, change the boot now so you don't have to worry about it later down the line where you have to buy an expensive rack instead of just like a $50 rubber boot. Do it now if you're not losing any fluid. But if you're losing fluid, then you're going to have to replace the whole rack eventually. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.